Okay, so I did not get any feedback from my proposal, just that it was accepted. So my project was exactly as my proposal said. It's a quiz that the client answers and gets feedback from, and it gets a score, and that they can look at a leaderboard of all the clients who have taken the quiz. There's no major differences besides the programming language. I wanted to use C++, but it ended up being kind of a mixture of C and C++. Okay, so now we can look at our project actually working. We can get a port number, and get a client to connect. Prompted for a username, so it can be anything. Um, Initially, we can view leaderboard, but there's no scores. And second, we can take a quiz. And so let's do really good on this one. Actually, let's do kind of bad. Kind of guess on some of these. So we only got 60 on this quiz. That's not great. We can view leaderboard there. And so say another client comes along. Well, let's just name him user 2 so it's easy to know. User 2 can also view leaderboard and see. But let's say that user 2 does pretty good on the quiz, right? And so he gets an 80 on the quiz. We can view the leaderboard here and see that the leaderboard has been updated with the current scores. And so let's say another user comes along. But let's say it wants to use the same username as before. The username's already taken, so we can't use it. But we can use a different one. So now we have a third client. We can view the leaderboard, but let's also take the quiz. Let's try to get an A and like a 100 on this quiz. Okay, so say we got a 100. Now we can view the leaderboard again and see that our third client, Sarah, is on the top. However, we can also take the quiz again, and let's say if we do absolutely terrible on this and get like a 0. See, we got a 0, so you can see our lowest score is a 0, highest score is a 100, and our average score is a 50. Now we can view leaderboard again, see that Sarah's all the way down at the bottom now, and we're left with our final leaderboard position. And at any point, we can just terminate the client, so our server is still running. Okay, so starting off, we're going to look at our client implementation. We just have disclaimer and all that stuff. One thing is, I did use AI tools in the generation of this file, just so I didn't have to write all these questions. We have our standard kind of libraries that are used here, constants, and into the main function, it takes the port number as an argument, as you can see here, right there. And I just used the localhost as kind of like a constant, so I didn't have to type it in every time. That was testing my code. And then moving on here into like the actual function of how this works. We have a do while loop, which this section here basically serves as a validation for a username. It takes the username, it converts it to a C string, which is one of the libraries I added. Basically, it converts it to a C string that we need to use to use it in the send function properly. And yeah, it sends the username to the server. The server basically, if the responses are 1, it means that the username is valid and not taken, and we can continue. Otherwise, we're going to get the error message that the username is taken, and it's going to loop. So after the username has been validated, we enter our main loop of the function, which first of all we get prompted for the options. The user can choose which one they want to see, and it sends the user selection to the server. And so if the user selected 1, all it does is simply request the information of the leaderboard from the server and prints it out, because the server is going to send it back already formatted. So it just prints it out. If the user wants to take a quiz, which option 2, it's going to enter a for loop and basically request a question each time, and then it's going to output that question to the user. Once again, it's already in the correct format, and the user is going to be prompted to type an answer. Then the answer that the user types is going to be sent back to the server. Then at the end, it's going to display the quiz results to the user, once again, in the correct format. And then any other value, or I should say the termination value 3, if that is chosen, it simply exits this while loop and closes the connection. Okay, so now we're going to be looking at our server implementation. Here we have our libraries, SStream, which allowed me to parse the data from the CSV file, CString, which I also used in the client process, and then include thread, which is basically just a C++ variant of pthreads, some cleaner syntax and mutexes and that kind of stuff. Our critical sections that I identified were the leaderboard and all users vectors. And for the questions class, I used a struct, as you can see here, with the user class. I also did the same thing. Moving on into getting random questions, basically this will just look at the vector of all of our questions, and we'll return a random question from that set. A reset visit, basically this just helps us make sure that there's not multiple of the same question in the quiz, which that's also what the visited part in our questions class does. Moving on to update score, basically this just, you pass in a user object and basically just updates all the scores for the user, like read, finds the average, again, finds our minimum and maximum values. Add to leaderboard and compare by average. These two functions kind of work together in order to, whenever a new entry is added to leaderboard, it formats it correctly, as in it knows where to place it on the leaderboard, pretty much. And we also sort it here at the end, which is where the compare by average function comes into play. Actually, let's look at the main function right now. We have our semaphore declarations, the server program, and also wanted to mention that a lot of like the server programming stuff, that's probably the hardest part of the program. And I ended up using like a lot of articles. Like this was a great article that I used. It helped me a lot. But also like YouTube videos, that sort of thing. Definitely the hardest part, especially trying to use C++. But anyways, here we have our critical sections, the leaderboard and the all users. Here we like enter into the thread, we create the thread for each new client, and we pass in the leaderboard and all users by reference, and so that these are modified and shared amongst all the users. Then at the end, we close it and destroy our semaphores. Now let's look at our server function. The first thing we need to do is get the questions CSV file into a readable format, which basically we just pass it, and basically each question, each line becomes an object, which we use with our question class. And basically this is just the process here of parsing the file and adding it to the questions class and adding each question object into a vector. Here we have our validation loop for the username on the server side, and basically it's taking in the username, looking if the username's already taken, and then if it is already taken, it's sending back the error message, but if not, it's sending back the 1. And we're also using semaphores here to protect when we're pushing back to all users, which is a critical section of shared data. So after we found out that the username is valid or not, we move on to our main selection menu. And this is on the server side. So if the user inputs 1, which means they want to view the leaderboard, we look here, and basically, because we're going to be reading from the leaderboard, so we want to protect it with the semaphores, with the reader count and whatnot. And then we want to look here, and if there's no entries on leaderboard, the message is going to be the error message that there's no current scores. But otherwise, we're going to use this stream object here, which basically this is allows us to format our string however we want before we send it to the client side. So it's very useful for like cleaning it up and all. And that's why the client side was so simple, is that I was able to just do everything on the server side, send it to client, immediately print it out. And so that's what this is all doing, basically cleaning it up. Yeah, just the leaderboard information. Okay, so now if the user inputs 2, we enter this for loop, which basically, first thing we do is get a random question. We format it correctly, we send it to the user, we get the user's answer, and if the user's answer is correct, we're going to add it to our current score. And at the end, we reset the visit between the quizzes. And then here, this whole section is basically kind of updating everything as a result of the quiz being taken. Like we update the user score, the user object, and we of course add to the leaderboard. And so when we're doing all this, we're writing to the critical sections. So that's why just all these functions are protected. Which, yeah, these functions are the ones already defined above, which I already talked about up here. Okay, so after the quiz has been taken, all the information has been updated. We of course need to send back the quiz results to the user. And here we use that stream object again, basically do the exact same thing and send it back to the client so that the client can view the results of the quiz that they just took.